One Piece was going to be a fifth of its current length. Oda said that he was going to wrap up One Piece in 5 years. Hard to imagine now, post chapter 1000, but that's another reason that I'm making this series, because at this point in the story, Oda had no clue about his success. Looking around at various places, an average Shonen Jump manga can last less than 6 months of serialization in the magazine. That's 26 chapters, assuming no breaks. If you're successful, you can last a couple of years, and if you're wildly successful, you may manage to last even longer than that. Long-running series like Bleach, Naruto, Hero Academia, and especially One Piece are the incredible outliers that have managed to achieve the impossible. Because we remember these absolute titans of Shonen Jump serialization, it seems like Jump is full of long-running mega successes. Looking at Shonen Jump from 1990 to 1997, the year One Piece was released, of the 104 manga that began serialization, only 18 managed to last longer than 3 years. I'll put up a breakdown on screen, pause to read it. That is to say that, in the early days, while Oda was confident, he didn't know how much time he had to write the series he'd been thinking of since he was a young boy. So every single chapter counts. Now, I don't believe Oda's original estimate. You can tell by other interviews that he's the kind of author that gets taken hostage by his own characters, and the series expands in length because of them. But even so, it means that the opening chapters of One Piece were Oda writing in a way that meant he could reach the ending sooner rather than later. If you don't know, concepts like the Seven Warlords and the Supernova were all introduced kind of on a whim, and think of how much those two concepts expanded the story. So, as we read through these opening arcs, keep that in mind as we continue discovering what is the point of East Blue. Now it's time for Orange Town, and we get 2 more major introductions, Buggy the Clown, and Nami. We start off with a bit of wacky comedy, where after some light-hearted banter, Luffy gets carried away by a giant bird. And I mean a giant bird. It's something to literally carry us into the next arc, and a tidbit of knowledge that giant creatures don't just exist in the sea, but also in the air and potentially in other places. Zoro literally runs into, or should I say rows into, some pirates. They tell Zoro about this beautiful but terrible woman, yet unnamed, but who we later find out to be Nami. There's a lot that can be said about Nami, so much nuance and depth to her character, and as Oda is oft wont to do, we start with a subversion. We see this poor, helpless girl desperate to be rescued, willing to give away a treasure chest for her safety. And then the facade melts away immediately. She's tricked these pirates, bamboozled them even, making up for a potential lack of physical ability with cunning. But that's not all we find out. We see her accurately predict a storm to the degree that she can get herself to a safe zone and at the same time shipwreck her pursuers. This is Nami, and she is cunning, intelligent, and very good with predicting the weather. And we also get introduced to her as someone who deceives others, who puts on a facade, quite a contrast to Zoro. Zoro comments, not so subtly, that this girl would make a great navigator, and as he does, Luffy literally falls into her path, and Nami uses Luffy to get away from some pirates. I'll mention one thing here. Luffy does first say to Nami, "I don't want to team up with you." And I had to reread that a couple of times because it seemed a bit odd that he'd say that and then shortly after invite Nami to his crew, but I think Luffy is saying it in response to Nami's invitation to rob pirates and make a fortune together. So he's not saying, "Wow, you rob pirates? I don't want to have a crew member who does that." Instead he's saying, "Nah, I don't want to team up to get rich robbing pirates. I have other things to do." Maybe it was clear to other people reading it, but I felt like I needed to clarify. We get an intro to Buggy, who I'll cover later, I'm covering Nami right now, and then Luffy and Nami sit in a house and have a conversation, one that Luffy is totally not paying attention to, which is hilarious. We learn a few more things about Nami. She doesn't steal from civilians, she only steals from pirates, she's aiming to buy a certain village, she hates pirates, and she is a navigator, or at least we get confirmation of this. Luffy, in desperate need of a navigator, only after learning that she isn't stealing from civilians, invites her to his crew. In fact, he actually asks if she knows anything about navigating and then invites her. So the order of operations is, she says she doesn't steal from civilians, she says she's aiming to buy the village, Luffy asks if she can navigate, not that if she is a navigator, she confirms, and then Luffy invites her to his crew. Remember that we're still learning Luffy's criteria for crew members and his moral compass. He's pragmatic, sure, he knows he needs a navigator, but the invite only comes after he confirms she does not steal from civilians. Not that it seems to bother him that she might be, Luffy is very much a you do you sort of guy, but it's not what he wants on his crew. A neat thing to pay attention to is Nami's expression in these early pages. I mentioned the facade earlier, but we can read some additional detail from Nami's expressions. Every panel but one, Nami is putting on a face for others, except one, which I'll get to. And usually it's a smile. There's a couple of exceptions, like the surprise when Luffy literally falls out of the sky, but as soon as it's time to win someone over, she's smiling. When she's trying to ingratiate herself with Luffy, it's all big smiles. When she tells him about Buggy, it's a light frown. Luffy manages to break her briefly, and maybe as a result, we see the real Nami for a moment. Her displeasure of being thought of to having robbed villagers, and then most importantly, a look of determination when she mentions her goal to buy a certain village. Luffy picks up on this, but then Nami puts on her sell face, and once again tries to win Luffy over. Then Luffy asks her to join his crew. And now we see Nami's disdain. Her smile and optimism gone. Immediate rejection, her smiles turn to a sneer. Though again, for a brief moment when Luffy mentions his hat as his treasure, Nami pauses. Someone who has talked big about making it rich, stealing treasure, getting lots of money, all material things, seeing Luffy talk about a materially worthless hat as his treasure makes her stop for just a moment. Of course, she's so jaded she shakes off the thoughts and declares her mission statement: hate pirates, love money, and tangerines. Let's get back to the face we don't see Nami make. It's the one when she's running away from Buggy's crew with the Grand Line map in hand. The one time when there's no one to see it. It's hard to tell, but she looks a bit desperate. Yes, you could say it's because she's running for her life, but I think it's a little more than that. She sees this map as her big break, an opportunity she's been waiting for who knows how long. I see a desperation of getting an opportunity and fearing that she may waste it. But maybe I'm reading too much into it. Nami then deceives and betrays Luffy. It's hard to really say betray because it's not like she's ever sworn any allegiance to him, and Luffy rescinds his invitation to his crew. And for her benefit, she brings Luffy to face Buggy. Time to take a break talking about Nami, though I'm definitely not done, and it's time to talk about Buggy. I've been a big Buggy fan for a long time, and boy is current One Piece a good time to be a Buggy fan. But here we get the Clown Prince of Piracy's introduction. It's a strange contradiction. He's a clown, big red nose, face makeup, flamboyant outfit. His crew are a colourful bunch, a literal circus crew. But he's introduced in this menacing, laid-back pose, someone who knows he's untouchable, the top of the food chain. We've heard earlier from the pirate Zoro ran into that he's eaten a devil fruit, but all we see is him doing, well, let's call it like it is. It looks like he's force choking a dude. It's also important to note that Buggy is of different temperament to Alvida. There's definitely a level of fear to Buggy's interactions with his crew and a level of abuse, but it mainly seems to be in relation to his mood rather than his default setting. Check out this party scene here and contrast it with the one with Shanks' crew. If the going is good, Buggy's crew has a good time. Alvida's crew is just seen working, going behind her back to drink and relax, but Buggy, he at least seems to know one of the key tenets to being a pirate. Luffy even points it out as something pirates are supposed to do. Throughout his introduction, we get his quirks, his violent anger at the mention of his big red nose, his brutality, but also his showmanship, his goofy side, his willingness to have a good time. And then it's as everyone is drinking, celebrating, having a wonderful time, that Buggy initiates Nami into his crew with a choice: kill Luffy. I say choice, but it's not. It's kill or be killed. Back to Nami. Even at the risk of her own life, Nami can't kill Luffy. She will use others for her needs, she will take advantage and betray pirates just to get one step forward, but she won't kill them. If she does, she'll be as bad as a pirate. Keep this in mind. And Luffy calls her out on it. Luffy reinforces his idea that pirates are those who risk their lives, and to go against people willing to put their lives on the line, you too need to put your own life on the line. Once again, pay attention to the exchange between Nami and Luffy here. Nami is bringing her notions of what pirates do, being prepared to kill someone like it's nothing, and Luffy, dropping his smile for a single panel, rebuffs her with a blunt no. Why does Nami have this idea? Well, we get a hint in a couple of pages after Nami has dropped her facade and refusing to murder Luffy. You pirates took someone dear to me, I'll never become what I hate. And importantly, Luffy notices. And now we see what I think is a character-defining moment for Nami. She throws away her weapon, grabs the lit fuse in an attempt to put it out with her bare hands, and shows her back to the enemy, actively trying to kill her. Luffy is a pirate, she hates pirates, but in this moment she goes beyond just refusing to actively kill him. She's not willing to passively leave him to his fate, she's actively trying to save his life. She may deceive, she may betray, but when it comes down to it, Nami is someone that wants to save others. Zoro shows up, flexing his East Blue reputation, and takes Buggy down. Or not. We finally meet our second Devil Fruit user, the eater of the Chop Chop Fruit. And what a great introduction. Same but different. We've learned that Luffy is pretty much impervious to physical blows, any sort of strikes as well as bullets, but he's vulnerable to blades. Buggy is his Devil Fruit opposite. He's completely invulnerable to blades, but vulnerable to blunt hits. Though he's better suited to dodge blunt hits than Luffy is. I also love Luffy's reaction to seeing another Devil Fruit eater for the first time. Zoro gets stabbed in the back, Luffy gets annoyed and says he'll clobber Buggy. Nami has two great panels where she first refuses to run because that means Luffy will die, and second when she thinks Zoro is deserting them. She is still thinking of a way to try and save Luffy. They fire a Buggy ball at Buggy's crew, and then in a brief moment of reprieve, Luffy says definitively that Nami is their new navigator. She denies it of course, but she has this great face of, "What am I going to do with you?" Then Zoro lifts the cage like a madman, and the three escape, with one more panel of Nami questioning her notions of what a pirate is for good measure. Now it's time for liberation! And for liberation we need someone to liberate, so let's meet Mayor Boodle and Chou Chou the dog. Now here's a serious question. Why Chou Chou? Or is it Chou Chou? I'm just going to keep calling him Chou Chou. Like, seriously, think back on what I said about every chapter mattering in the early days of One Piece. We spent 2 of the first 13 chapters on a story about a dog. There's a reason why Chou Chou... I'm saying Chou Chou now. Damn it. Well, there was a reason that Chou Chou was cut entirely from the live action. But they shouldn't have. Because Chou Chou is the template for the story of the rest of the East Blue Straw Hats, and a story for the audience to understand what it means to lose your treasure. I'm really starting to run long, so I'll do an abridged version. Chou Chou's treasure is the pet food store whose owner has died but left it in Chou Chou's hands to protect. Moji and Richie come across the store and simply see it as a means to an end. Richie wants a snack. Not to mention they don't think of it much beyond its value that it provides them. Despite being obviously outmatched, Chou Chou fights as hard as he can against insurmountable odds to protect his treasure. Then Luffy comes in at the last moment to save the day, defeating the villain and protecting... No, Luffy is not there. He doesn't get there on time. Chou Chou loses his treasure. Despite trying his best, Chou Chou's strength was not enough. Unlike Usopp, Sanji, and later Nami, Luffy isn't there to stop Chou Chou's treasure from being taken from him. When Luffy rounds the corner and sees the store ablaze, there's a moment of cold shock. Then he takes a moment to take it in, to process what he's seeing. Somebody losing what they treasure. When he confronts Moji, we see something from Luffy that we haven't seen yet in this series. Rage. Then we get what I like to call a prototype. There are a few prototypes in the series, panels that are very similar to other panels. Obviously, you can only call them prototypes with the benefit of hindsight, but the finishing blow on Moji, at least to me, looks like Luffy's blow on Bellamy. A blow of righteous anger against someone that in one case has trampled on the treasure of another, and in the other case trampled on the dream of another. It's a great punch in both cases. It's tenuous at best to say that Luffy's experience with Chou Chou increased his determination to protect the treasure of others, but what I can say is that for the rest of the East Blue, Luffy isn't going to let us, the audience, see someone's treasure get destroyed. But we did need to see it. It's one thing for Luffy to state that his hat is his treasure. All we can really understand is that, okay, Luffy's hat is important to him, but what Oda can do instead is clarify using Chou Chou's experience. He can show us, no, a treasure is more than just something you think is important. It's something worth putting your life on the line to protect. It's something that goes far beyond its physical worth. It's something devastating to lose. A treasure is something that villains do not understand the worth of. But a treasure is something that Luffy does understand the worth of, even when it's not his own treasure. Chou Chou's story is also important as it's the start of a turning point for Nami. Of course, she sees Luffy immediately in the aftermath of the destruction of the store, and she's livid. Despite just trying to save Luffy's life, she outright says she ought to kill him before Luffy gets enough power to cause the sort of destruction that Buggy's crew has. I think Luffy is starting to understand Nami though, so he doesn't take her too seriously. She then watches as Luffy gives Chou Chou the final box of pet food, and once again, her notions of what a pirate does is overturned. And for the first time, she gives Luffy an actual, genuine smile. This is why Chou Chou's story is important. We see what it means to lose your treasure, we see Luffy's rage for the first time, and we see Nami's genuine smile for the first time. Now, after all of that, some comedy. I love the two lines of, "That boy must have used some diabolical rubbing technique," and "beaten by a masseur." Ah man, I love Buggy. Alright, back to the plot. Nami actually apologizes to Luffy, and Luffy, funnily enough, states his emotional intelligence outright for once, and also, classic Luffy, and I will bring this point up in a later part, says that he doesn't want to hear the details. We hear the backstory of the mayor, and once again we hear about someone's treasure. The theme of the story certainly isn't subtle, is it? Of course, Buggy immediately destroys another large portion of the town as soon as the mayor has finished his story, destroying the house Zoro was sleeping in the process, and the mayor, finally having reached his wit's end, charges off to face Buggy. I love this interaction right here. Nami tries to dissuade the mayor from being reckless, "Getting yourself killed won't accomplish anything," and tears in his eyes, the mayor acknowledges that, "Yeah, I am being reckless." The implication being the same as with Chou Chou. It doesn't matter if the odds are impossible, he needs to protect his treasure. Nami says that he, the mayor, was crying, but Luffy doesn't see it that way. It's kind of a glimpse into what Luffy sees in Usopp when we get to his arc. Luffy isn't seeing the fear that the mayor has, he's seeing his determination and willpower to take on Buggy in spite of it. Luffy respects that and states that he's not going to let the mayor die. Nami then agrees to join forces with Luffy, a big step in comparison to how she was a few chapters back, though she explicitly states that she won't become a pirate, and then the three of them, including Zoro, go off to face Buggy. Now, I get to talk about Buggy again. First neat thing to note is that he does have a bit of honor. The mayor challenges him, and though Cabaji wants to intervene, Buggy doesn't let him. It's another case of, alright, this guy isn't just a pure villain, there is an undercurrent of real piracy about him. And we finally learn why Buggy is the villain of this arc specifically. Because Buggy doesn't believe in personal treasure, he doesn't believe in value beyond the dollar figure, he values gold and jewels, he values literal treasure. This arc is revealed to be a clash of ideals between those who have personal treasure and those who don't. And that's why Nami is introduced in this clash. Ostensibly, she's got the exact same ideals as Buggy, at least from a surface level. Treasure, treasure, treasure. But one core thing makes them different. Nami seems to understand the value of personal treasure, while Buggy does not. When things seem darkest for the mayor, Luffy shows up and knocks him out. Man, Luffy is great. I love his straightforward way of thinking. I also like that Zoro is totally on the same wavelength too. Then we get a great reveal of a literal expansion to Luffy's abilities, the Gum Gum Balloon. It's a great reveal. So far we've only seen Luffy extend his limbs, but now we've seen him inflate himself, a natural but also very cartoonish addition to the list of things that the Gum Gum fruit lets Luffy do. I wonder if Luffy will be able to use this concept of taking air to expand himself in different ways in the future. Who knows? Alright, it's time for the showdown with Buggy, and gasp, plot hole. Nami states that he pile-drived a lion. I don't think she actually saw that. Oda's a hack. Just kidding, let's get to the showdown. First, Zoro versus Cabaji. This fight has a couple of notable moments in it, none of them involving Cabaji, frankly. First, let's talk about the Luffy moment. He makes sure Buggy doesn't interfere with Zoro's duel. Luffy understands Zoro's honor as a swordsman, as pointed out last part, so in a duel between swordsmen, Luffy won't interfere, which will be more important later. And then there's Zoro. I've not talked about his moments this arc because they really didn't flow with the recap smoothly, so I'm just going to talk about them all here. Zoro is freaking tough, and stupid, but tough. We see him lift a giant cannon, a heavy metal cage, both after being stabbed in the stomach, then after a short nap, which gets interrupted by an explosion, which the normal people think killed him, he claims to have recovered, which Nami's reaction is appropriate. And now, finally in the duel with Cabaji, we see the peak of his nonsense after Cabaji continuously attacks his wound, and his response is to make it worse, cause why not? He needs more of a handicap. If he loses a fight because his guts are spilling out, he could never become the world's greatest swordsman. The absolute madman. We also see Zoro's fight philosophy. He gets pretty annoyed at Cabaji because, despite claiming to be a swordsman, he's using tricks instead of just his sword skills. I think Zoro doesn't see that as honorable swordsmanship behavior. Our boy Zoro isn't going to supplement his sword skills with other weapons and other nonsense. He's a man of his sword and a man of his word. And we see the outcome. When Cabaji finally goes to strike with just his swordsmanship skills, he gets destroyed in one move. Luffy versus Buggy. Before we get to the actual fight, Luffy and Buggy have a conversation, and it's pretty illuminating. First, Buggy implies that he's been to the Grand Line before when he says that Luffy won't last there. This is important because the Grand Line, as stated previously, is also known as the Pirate Graveyard, yet Buggy has been there and come back to tell the tale. Interesting. Now, something I find just as interesting is when Luffy says he's going to be king of the pirates, and Buggy's response is dismissive. If you're king of the pirates, then what am I, god of the pirates? He's dismissing Luffy as an upstart, but unlike many pirates we'll see, he's not saying, "What? No, I will be king of the pirates." He's just throwing shade on Luffy's ability to become the pirate king. He does say that the world's treasure will be his, which I interpret in the context of the previous panel of him saying he wants all the treasure, that he wants the treasure, see gold, jewels, etc., that the One Piece contains, but he doesn't want the title that goes along with it. Let me know if you've got different interpretation, or whether I'm thinking this way because of revelations in later chapters. The two fight for a while, and Buggy intentionally targets Luffy's hat, which makes Luffy really angry. Then Buggy does the real reveal. He was crewmates with Shanks way back in the day, and we're treated to a flashback. We see on the ship that Shanks was raised on that Buggy was a bit of an outlier, that the rest of the crew is more like Shanks, and that Buggy was the only one really obsessed with treasure. He, in a line that only gets funnier as time goes on, calls the rest of the crew soft. We do see that they did like to party though, so at least Buggy picked up on that. I suppose that explains the slight similarity between the two. Buggy accidentally eats the devil fruit, loses his ability to get the treasure on the seafloor as a result, and Shanks saves his life. We see a couple of other characters in the flashback, but, well, we won't understand their significance for a long, long time. Oh, and Shanks doesn't have the scar on his eye yet, just thought I'd point that out. Back to the fight at hand. Buggy goes after Nami and the fight changes to comedy as Luffy takes advantage of the fact that Buggy can't see what he's doing to his other body parts. Nami has a moment of thieving philosophy, I guess? And then we're treated to a variety of great Buggy faces as Luffy abuses his feet. Nami ties up Buggy's disparate parts as Luffy launches a miniature Buggy into the sky Team Rocket style. Now, in the wind down part of the arc, we start wrapping things up. Luffy gets his hat, Zoro wakes up, Luffy admits to knocking out the mayor and to being a pirate because our sweet rubber boy is physically incapable of lying. They run as the townspeople chase them and Chou Chou comes to their defense, and they make it back to Nami's ship. The mayor wakes up and in a great symbolic gesture he tears off his protective gear as he chases them down, shedding his armor, and now defenseless he sincerely thanks the trio for what they've done. There's one last very sweet interaction at the end of the chapter, as it's revealed that Luffy left 500,000 berries of the treasure Nami took from Buggy at the town to help them rebuild. Nami is initially angry, but as we see her biggest smile yet, she affectionately calls Luffy an idiot. She loves her treasure, but Luffy's act of giving it to people who need it, well, she's not too angry about that. One final reminder that there's more to Nami than meets the eye. And finally, the arc concludes. I think I've covered everything we need to know about the characters. Well, actually, one more thing about Zoro from the very start of this arc. I didn't mention it in the last video since it could be wrapped up tidily with the start of this arc. Everything that everyone in the East Blue knows about Zoro is a lie. While him being referred to as a demon is cool foreshadowing for all his hell and devil-named moves in the future, the main reason he's called that is there's this perception of evil about him. Just look at the silhouette that he has when Alvida describes him, which we definitively discovered last arc wasn't true. Now, the last two pre-descriptions of his character are pulled away. First is that of Pirate Hunter. Now, I'm not saying that Zoro didn't hunt pirates, he obviously did, but his reasoning is revealed here. He didn't go out seeking fame and fortune hunting pirates and collecting bounties, he set out to sea for a different reason. And only because he needed money to survive that he thought, well, I have a very limited skill set, so the quickest way to earn berry is to turn in pirates for their bounties. He has no real attachment to his title as Pirate Hunter. This also shows something else. Remember how Zoro was called clever? Yeah, well, that was a lie. It was kind of dumb how he ended up in this whole situation in the first place. He literally got lost. I wonder if that's going to happen to him again. Really, as opposed to his dark and intimidating demeanor that we first met him and how he is first referred to by others, we see a pretty cheery, happy Zoro. He's perfectly capable of comedic outbursts and wacky expressions. He doesn't act like a "I'm too cool for you" stoic badass most of the time. When he's relaxed around his nakama, he is friendly and has more than one expression. I mean, just look at him laughing in this chapter. Take notes, live action! Also, Nami is really good at drinking. I think it's a neat character trait. She's trained herself to be a great drinker, so she can drink her pirate targets under the table and loot them while they're passed out. And the important thing about Luffy, which happens at the very start of this arc. This one panel right here, after Zoro says they need a navigator, Luffy says in response that we need a cook and a musician. He's acknowledging that, yeah, they need a navigator, but equally important to the person that makes sure they don't get lost and die at sea is a cook, which makes sense in the context. They're literally talking about how they're lost and starving, but then Luffy says musician. This won't be the only time Luffy mentions that he wants a musician on the crew either. We can guess why that is at this point, but we'll get an answer in another 80-something chapters. Alright, I think that covers character. Let's get through world building. There's some juicy stuff this chapter. I mean, it's always juicy when we learn more about the elusive Shanks, though frankly we don't know how cool this flashback is just yet. But more important to the world building, we learn a bit more about devil fruits. Mainly, well, they grant different types of abilities. We didn't actually know that. We also see that Buggy's fruit looks different to Luffy's, though they both contain swirls, so that's something we've learned now too. We saw the introduction of giant creatures in the sky, expanding our knowledge that there's more than just giant sea creatures, and we get the reinforcement of bizarre fighting styles with Cabaji, even if Zoro isn't amused by them. We also just get that people look weird. Sure, Alvida and the yet unnamed member of Shanks' crew, yes, I know his name is Lucky Roo, but we don't know that yet, are comically fat, but in Buggy's crew we get, well, Buggy himself with his big red clown nose, and Moji whose hair is... well, just look at it. I think that covers world building. Finally, the arc's themes. It's been mentioned multiple times, but the big theme introduced this arc is personal treasure. It's another theme that's pretty native to the East Blue Saga. Luffy's hat, Chou Chou's pet store, the mayor's town. And I'd hazard a guess that Zoro's sword from Kuina is his treasure. Then we contrast that to Buggy, who doesn't appear to have a personal treasure, but is just obsessed with more conventional treasure, gold, jewels, money, etc. And then we meet Nami. The one character that doesn't state her treasure in this chapter, but she's got one. And that's not just future knowledge speaking. The tell is that those who don't have a treasure don't respect the personal treasure of others. That's why Buggy blows up the town, damages Luffy's hat, destroys the pet store. He doesn't have something he values as a personal treasure, so he can't understand the treasure of others. Dreams, surprisingly, aren't actually covered this arc. I know, astounding. Kobe was introduced with a dream, Zoro was introduced with a dream, but Nami doesn't have one. Yet. Interesting, let's keep it in mind. I guess with all the talk of treasure, we didn't have much time to talk about dreams. I feel like it's obligatory at this point, but once again, Luffy's liberation loop makes a stunning appearance as Luffy liberates the town from Buggy's tyranny. And then, once more, let's talk about those classic East Blue questions. What does it mean to be a pirate? And what does it mean to be a captain? This arc is definitely more pirate question focused, and we get some juicy info. First we get the Buggy perspective. Real pirates are all about that booty. It's all about finding treasure, getting treasure maps to find treasure, and accumulating wealth. It's about the doubloons, baby, but purely the pursuit of personal material wealth is Buggy's downfall. First in his youth is his desire to deceive others to smuggle the devil fruit to resell it, resulted in him not only accidentally eating it and missing out on the wealth that way, but also losing the ability to pursue the treasure marked on the treasure map. He tried to get too much wealth and ended up losing all of it. Poignant. It's the same reason he's defeated. He gets distracted during his fight with Luffy and literally splits himself to stop Nami from taking his treasure. Before this point, Buggy and Luffy were pretty evenly matched in my opinion, but Luffy kept his eyes on the prize, defeating Buggy, but once again Buggy's pursuit in protecting his material wealth meant that he lost it all instead. Then we get the pirate perspective from Nami, and it's all about killing and abandoning, ruthlessness and selfishness, and in dozens of chapters we'll find out why she thinks this way. And that's it. 21 chapters completed. I'm getting a little nervous. These arcs keep getting longer and longer, which means my scripts keep getting longer and longer, which means these videos will get longer and longer, which means editing will get longer and longer. So next chapter, we're going to take a step back a bit and cover perhaps one of the strangest additions to the East Blue saga, Gaimon, a one-chapter story plonked in the middle of the East Blue. But remember, every chapter matters. Every chapter teaches us something new. Though I'll do something else in the next video as well. I've been picking up on additional things during my editing process, so I'll also talk about those. I've got 7 things in the list so far, and I'm sure another couple will be added while I edit this video. Though what would be great is if you, my much appreciated viewers, also contributed. What may I have overlooked in my deep dive? What additional bits of information have been noticed? Remember, try and keep it to the first 21 chapters. I know I sort of broke that rule with the Celestial Dragon stuff last video, and I'll look into it. After all, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.